It's a universal, fundamental question that every human being asks sooner or later. Where do we go from here? What happens at the end of life? And the way it's worded, the way the question is asked, is there life after death? We're going to find out that that question is really misworded. It's not after death because life doesn't die. So if you're saying, is there life after death? No, what's dead is dead. The question is, what dies and what lives? Or more fundamentally, what is life? And what does it mean that life left? Where did it go? It can't just disappear. Nothing just disappears. Where did it go? So religion says, well, there are two places to go, up or down. There's no up and there's no down when it comes to life. Life doesn't take up space. So there's no up or down in terms of space. So what happens? To appreciate what happens when life leaves, we first have to understand and appreciate what happens when life comes. What does it mean that somebody is born? We don't ask that question. We ask, why do people suffer? Why do people die? Why are people born? Why do people have fun? Ever asked that question? Why is there pleasure? Nobody asks that. But why is there pain? So in order to understand one, we have to understand the other. So what does the Torah tell us? The Torah says, very descriptively, that when God created the first human being, he fashioned a body out of earth and then breathed into it a living soul. Which means the body doesn't come with life. The body is not a living thing. It's 100 pounds of clay. Where does the life come from? That is something that God invests into the body. He breathes into the body a living soul. Now the rest of creation, if you remember, everything else God created, he created by speech. God said, let there be, and there was. Only when it comes to the soul, when it comes to life, does the Torah say, he breathed life into the body. He didn't say, let it come alive. Let it live. The difference between speaking and breathing both involve breath. But what the breath you use for speech is the superficial, the breath that exists on the surface or near the surface. And that's why you can talk endlessly and not get tired. At least I can. But when you're blowing up a balloon, just a little balloon, after a minute you're exhausted. It's not because you're using up more breath, but because you're using a deeper breath, or an inner breath, the breath that is necessary for life. The breath you use for speaking isn't necessary for life. You can live without it. You can live without speaking. But the breath that is the breath of life, this you can't afford to exhaust from yourself because it's essential. So when God created light and God created grass and God created animals, he said, let there be. He used a surface breath, not a very personal inner. But when he gave life to the human being, he breathed something from within himself into the human being. Very, very different. Now, if you're a little aware in scientific terms, Einstein came up with this brilliant insight where he says the universe is made up of mass and energy. Different kinds of masses, different kinds of energies. What he discovered was that energy can become mass. It's like the expression, if you talk a lot, you're building a wall of words that keep people from getting any closer to you. So here is energy becoming a mass. It's words, it's turning into a wall. So energy becomes mass, and mass can dissolve into energy. That does not include life. Life is not energy. It's certainly not electrical energy. Life is a completely different entity, different from mass, different from energy. What exactly is life? Life is a living entity that in the human being is composed of 10 or more functions. We call it a soul. What is a soul? A living energy, a living being that thinks, feels, behaves. That's a human being, and that comes to the body, not from the body. So how does the soul come to the body? So we're told some fascinating things. King David says in Psalms, "My mother and father abandoned me, but God gathered me in." What is he saying? What is he talking about? He remembered the moment of conception, when he was conceived. Holy people don't forget. So he remembered the experience of being conceived. Now, what do you call the conception? It's not even a fetus yet. An embryo? A zygote? I hate that word. Cute little baby, why would you call it a zygote? It's a pastnischt, you know what I mean? But whatever that little being is at the moment of conception, it is experiencing the most dramatic and the most traumatic moment of its existence. It has made contact with the physical world. Hasn't developed much yet in the physical, but it's made contact. So King David says, I remember when that happened to me. I was feeling a little helpless. And I looked around to see who's babysitting, who's taking care of me. I looked at my father, he was sleeping. I look at my mother, she's sleeping. And here I am, tiny little being going through the most traumatic experience. I'm all by myself. But then I realized, no, God is there guiding my experience. And that reassured me, and I was able to continue to develop. 40 days before conception, the soul is told that it's going to be born. You have time to acclimate to the idea that you're leaving heaven and you're going to be born into the physical world. The soul doesn't like that, is not thrilled by the idea, but it does have time to get used to it. So when does the birth of a child begin? Essentially, 40 days before conception. In the Torah it says, every time a woman was given a blessing that she was going to have a child, it was always this time next year. 12 months. Doesn't take 12 months. Not the part we know about. But it's more than 9 months because there's time for the soul to get adjusted, to go from heaven to heaven until it comes down into the conception. Now, at the moment of conception, the soul is complete. Because the soul is never underdeveloped. The soul is always complete. Life is life. There's no partial life, a little life. But the physical needs time to grow and develop and evolve. So at the moment of conception, the soul is completely matured. The body hardly exists. Which means when you have a baby, the first thing you do is completely spiritual. It's hardly physical at all. And that's why the education you're given in public school in how babies are made is so inadequate. It only describes the body. And at the moment of conception, the most dramatic part of birth, there is no body, or hardly. But there is a soul. So here's the shocker. From the moment of conception, the embryo hears everything, sees everything, feels everything, and understands everything. Because it's a complete soul. And all of those activities are soul activities. The eye doesn't see. The soul sees through the eye. It hears through the ear. It speaks through the mouth. It thinks in the brain. It feels in the heart. But it's the soul doing it, not the body parts. Which means that when the embryo hears the conversation that the parents are having, it hears it better because it's not using the ears, because the ears haven't developed yet. When the ears develop and the child is born, now it's going to hear through the ear. It doesn't hear as well anymore. It hears better without the ear. It sees better without the eye. Some people say they've had out-of-body experiences or near-death experiences. They saw, they heard, they saw better. They could see three-dimensional because they're not using their eye. The soul is seeing without the eye, hearing without the ear. So it hears and sees better. Person in a coma, God forbid, same thing. They hear everything, they see everything. They just can't communicate to others. And we know this is true because there are people who were in a coma for 2 or 3 years and then they come out and they remember everything that was said in the room while they were in a coma. So there's a group in Israel, I think Yerushalayim, a group of women. They're dedicated to visiting people in comas in the hospital. They will come and tell you what week it is, what Torah portion is being read this week, what it says in the Torah portion. And some of these people come out of the coma, and they're scholars. They're Talmidei Chachamim. They know every parsha. Because when you hear without the body, you hear better, you remember better, you understand better. That's why at the end of life, the body is still perfectly intact, but the soul is gone. So the body hears nothing, sees nothing, says nothing. Because all those activities are life activities that come from this living being called the soul. So it would be silly to ask, where does the soul get its energy from? It is energy. Where does it get its life from? It is life. That's like the comedian who says, what do batteries run on? The batteries need a battery? No, they don't. They are the battery. Therefore, the question, is there life after death, is not an appropriate question at all. Life does not die. It doesn't even make any sense. Life can't be dead. Just like death can't live, life can't die. So whether the soul continues on without the body, of course it does. A soul is a soul, it's not a body. So what happens at the end of life? The soul that was invested in the body separates from the body and goes back to where souls come from. So what does the body do? From dust you are, and to dust you return. So there's this famous poem, if I remember this correctly, it says, life is good, life is earnest, and the grave is not its goal. From dust you are, and to dust returneth, was never said of the soul. So what goes back to the dust? What came from the dust, which is only the body? Where does the soul go? Well, like everything else, it goes back to where it came from. Fully alive, with its memory intact, with its relationships in place, still devoted to the people that it was devoted to while it was in the body, and it continues to live. In fact, it continues to live better than it was in the body, because now it doesn't have to accept the restrictions of the body. So the soul of your grandfather in heaven hears you better, sees you better than before he passed away, when his hearing and his eyesight were a little schwach, without the hearing aid. If you enjoyed this conversation or this topic, and you're looking for more information, or you want to hear it again from another angle, there's a way to do that. And that is in this book. It's all there. Order it from Amazon. You can read it, reread it, and share it. We have a Sunday night program for VIPs that you might be interested in. It's informal. It's questions and answers. It's conversation. It's really relaxed. It's really pleasant, enjoyable, informative, and kind of community-like. It's a Sunday night program. There's a Wednesday morning program for the VIPs, and there's a Wednesday night program. All of it just conversation, casual, laid back, unscripted. So join us. Take a look. Click the link below and see which of the three suits you best, and join us for some enjoyable conversation.